out of the 3 sessions I've done today, this will be the most technical one. This will be the most action-packed, where I show things, actual things and techniques in Photoshop. These are probably the best techniques to speed up your workflow and to really be efficient, because that's what you need to be as a designer. You need to be always on time, very fast, and you have to be very flexible. So whatever you do in Photoshop, you have to be able to change it that fast. Because if you don't have that, then you will be always lagging and you will be just too slow to be able to work in this industry, especially like where I worked for the last 1 year in the licensing industry. It's so demanding that you have to be really fast and have to do everything completely non-destructively. So I collected throughout the years I'm in design and I'm using Photoshop. I collected these 20 best time savers, which I consider the best to do whenever you are, whatever you are doing, and whenever using Photoshop. So I'm going to try to go through this in an hour. It's quite a lot, but I will try my best to cover. So enough said. First one is fill shortcuts and some content-aware tips. There's a couple of keyboard shortcuts. Actually, it's quite good if you can write these down. I don't have them all written down in one page, so I will mention quite a lot of keyboard shortcuts. First of all, let me just create a new layer. I would like to show you that if you want to, I will put this layer on top. If you want to fill a layer or a selection, first let me show you a selection. So I have a selection. I want to fill it in with my foreground or background colors, which I can easily change there. It's the default keyboard shortcut. Alt or Option backspace will be the foreground color. Command backspace will be the background color. And if you don't have a selection, the same applies to the whole layer. So Alt backspace, Command backspace will fill with foreground, background colors. Shift backspace will give you another option that will actually give the fill menu, the dialog box, where you can choose what you want to do. Now there is a very interesting feature also in Photoshop to fill with history. And I wonder if you ever had that problem. Let me just open up an image. Wonder if you ever had that problem that you start working in Photoshop and let's say you already know that you should work non-destructively, which means work on a separate layer. So for example, if I want to do a retouch on this image and I want to start working on the skin, like here, let's say, and I start using, for example, the spot healing brush tool. Oops, I don't want the bamboo dock. So if I start working with the spot healing brush tool, but I don't make a separate layer, okay, and I start working with this and I make some mistakes. Let's just make a big mistake. Draw over the eye. Yeah, it will be quite scary. It will be good for a horror poster. But let's just say I did these mistakes and I want to go back to the original. But I've done so many changes and I haven't changed the preference to have lots of history steps to go back. So yeah, let's say I can't go back and I have to start from scratch. Instead of doing that, what you can do is create a new layer, an empty layer, press Shift backspace for the fill function and choose history from the fill menu and then click on OK. And that will bring back your original document and you can combine that with all the other layers you already have. So you can basically reference back to the original file, or if you use another feature which is also very useful, it's called snapshots. It's under the history panel. In the history panel, by the way, you can see all your actions that you do in Photoshop. And if you go to the history options in the history panel, you will have this option called automatically create new snapshot when using. So if you choose this option, that means whenever you save your document, and let me just save this now, I'm going to save it on my desktop, okay? You will see that it automatically created a new snapshot here, okay? There's a new snapshot. And let me just show you if I, for example, use my brush and I draw over this image. I don't know why it's so slow, but I just drew over it. And I save it. That will be again a new snapshot. So now what I can do is I can select these snapshots and you can see these are the stages when I save my document. And let's just say I would like to replace just this part with the history, and the history is set to the original stage. This is the history state here in the history panel. So if I now press Shift Backspace and history is selected, I click on OK, only that part will be filled from the original details of the image, or whichever I selected as a source. Okay, so it looks a bit complex, but it's actually really simple. All you need to do to set this option up in the history panel, under history option called automatically create new snapshots, so I'm saving. So whenever you save, it will create a snapshot which you can select as a history source. So now, for example, just to see how flexible it is, if I select that snapshot where I had that brush saved on her forehead, and I select again that area, and I press Shift Backspace, fill with history, I can fill it back again. And I'm still on the same layer, and I'm not doing undo, redo. These are all new actions, but still going back and forth in time. So it's completely not in a linear way editing the image. Okay, so the way I think about the history panel and these steps back and forth is almost like using separate layers, but combining the two together, you can be very, very fast in making amends, even if you haven't done it in a separate layer. So that will definitely save you a lot of time. And I would like to show you also a couple of interesting things about the Content Aware tool. Have you ever used Content Aware fill in Photoshop? How many of you tried Content Aware? Excellent. Have you had problems with the Content Aware when you had, let's say, a more complex image and it filled in something strange? Okay. Have you tried masking combined with Content Aware fill? Okay, I'll show you. It's a very simple technique, but can help a lot. Let me find that file. So it's in the basics. By the way, these are examples I usually use on my courses. Even if you're interested, I have some brochures here of my courses that I do. So it's the let's just use this one. So that's a good example. When I want to get rid of this girl here, I just make a quick selection. It's not even close selection, just like a quick selection of her, including the shadows as well. And as you can see, this image is quite complex. For you who haven't used Content Aware Fill before, it means that I won't do any retouching. I just tell Photoshop that please select this part. I selected this part, and please Photoshop, get rid of her from the image, but by making look like she wasn't there. It's an amazing feature, and it works quite well, but in this case, because it gets a little bit complicated, in this image there are so many things going on, but still Photoshop will do quite a good job. I just select not history. Once again, I press Shift Backspace, and I select Content Aware Fill. I press Enter, and let's see what it does. Done a really good job here. Even followed the angle, and the bricks are fine. Let's just get rid of the selection. The only problem is this here. This one is clearly visible that it came from there. So Photoshop tried to find areas in the image which can be used to replace it. And the reason why I use that one, because it's very similar to the color of the lake. In this case, the lake, or this little pond, was also green. So it thought, yeah, that green color will be fine to replace it here. So in this case, what I would do, I still want to save time using Content Aware Fill instead of using the clone stamp tool and cloning over her. So what I will do, and let me do this from scratch, I am making a selection of this part, which I think will be used for replacement. I can even include this part here. So I look at the image and I say, okay, if I would do this retouch, I would probably sample from this area. I wouldn't go further than that because that's irrelevant for the replacement. So I select this, save this as a mask. I click here on the bottom. If you can see that, that's the masking. So I save this selection as a mask. Then I create another selection which I would like to replace. And by the way, another very useful keyboard shortcut. While making a selection, any selections, if you hold down space, you can move that selection while you are still making it. Okay, so whenever you have that problem that you want to select, let's say in this case the girl, and I start the selection from here, I can see, oh, I can't cover her head. So I hold down space, move it there, and then I let go space, and then I can finish my selection. Okay, very easy. While I'm holding space, I can move the selection, and I let go space, I can finish editing my selection. So once I have the mask hiding all the irrelevant parts, and then I have my selection, I can just simply press Shift Backspace using Content Aware Fill, press Enter, and basically what I've done, yeah, that's a mistake. If you have the mask selected, it has to be on the image, so not the mask, the image selected in this case. All I've done is basically helping Photoshop to be able to see which parts can be useful for this replacement. Okay, so sometimes you can rely on Photoshop on its own. Photoshop can do the job, but when it's complicated, you can always have Photoshop out. And all you need to do to see the whole image again is shift-click on the mask. You shift-click on the mask, thumbnail, it will again show the whole image. So quick way to get around that problem. Okay, so content-aware option is content-aware fill is definitely a great feature in Photoshop. It saves a lot of time, especially in retouch and photo manipulation. Now, a couple of useful keyboard shortcuts if you are using the brush tool. I'm sure you know about the square bracket keys to increase incrementally the size of the brush. The square bracket keys can be used for that, but there is a much better way to do it. If you hold down Control and Alt and then click, you can drag right and left to change the size and drag up and down to change the hardness. So Control Alt click. I think on PC it's right click. Control Alt right click. Maybe click. Maybe they changed it in CS6. It depends on the version as well. They introduced this feature in CS4. Before that it won't work, but with CS4 or later it will work. So this Control Alt click right left size up down hardness, very useful feature. Okay, and another useful feature is the hot color picker, which is on Mac. It's Control Alt Command and click. Control Alt Command click, which will give you this thing called the hot heads up display, hot color picker, which you can customize in the preferences, and it's a very fast way to select colors. So I can select, let's say, I want this hue, and then from that hue I want the darkness and the saturation from here in the middle. And I'll show you it's under the preferences. If we go to preferences, general, under hot color picker, I can change the wheel size, and I can even set it to, instead of using a wheel, it can be a strip. So let me just show you the hue strip. The same feature will look like this. So whichever you are more comfortable using. Okay, Control or Command. For PC, it's Control Alt Shift. And maybe right click or left click, I don't know. But one of the two. Okay, hot color picker. Another useful thing which they recently introduced, by the way, is the color picker. If you have the brush tool and just simply Alt click, you can sample a color, and you can see always the previously sampled color. So for example, if I sample here and then I sample from, let's say, a little bit above that, I can compare those two colors or two shades. You see at the bottom the previously selected darker color, and on the top I can see the new selection. And by the way, very useful thing, if you work in web design, and let's say, let me just close this one here, and let's just go back to Chrome, and let's just say I would like to sample a color from one of these logos here. Okay, it's a very generic thing that we need in web design. So I want to sample from that Google icon. Okay, I'm going to create a new layer here, and I'm using my brush tool. And what you need to do, hold down Alt or Option, click in Photoshop anywhere, and then drag your mouse over your browser and just look at on the color options. While I'm moving it, Photoshop still interacts with my mouse, so I can pick a color from any of these parts. I can pick the blue, or backspace, and it's there. Okay. So Alt, click, and then drag outside of Photoshop, and it still works. It's really useful, fast way to sample colors from the internet or from anywhere. It can be a film, like watching a film, you can still pick colors from that from Photoshop straight away. Well, quite useful feature. Okay, so these are the brush shortcuts that definitely good to know about. And there is also, let me just check that one. There's also another keyboard shortcut. If you are using custom brushes, what I am using most of the time, here you can see I have quite a lot of custom brushes like small, text, and lots of different things. If you use these, and let me just show you, for example, here if I start using the white brush, I can show you how it looks. The thing with custom brushes is that you usually want to switch between them a lot of times. To switch between them, and instead of coming here all the time and change, you can simply use the full stop and the comma. These two keyboard shortcuts will go back and forth between your custom brushes or your brush palette. Okay, so you can see I can quickly switch between them. And by the way, if you have a massive brush like this, which looks interesting, but once you start working with it, it makes it impossible to see what you are doing. Just press caps lock. Okay, press caps lock on the keyboard, and that will get rid of the preview of the brush itself, and you will just have a target. And you can still add that big, massive brush and draw with it, but you won't see the outline. Okay, caps lock switches between the precise and the standard view of the brush. By the way, this is also something you can set up under the preferences cursors. Here you can see for painting cursors we have the normal brush tip, or you can set it to precise, and then it always be just the target. You won't see the edges. But I prefer to see the normal brush most of the time, and if I don't want to see it, I just press caps lock. Okay, interface shortcuts, also useful thing to know. How many of you work with Photoshop CS6? Hands up. Oh, that's not bad. CS5. Okay, that's probably the most. CS4. Okay, that's fine. This keyboard shortcut is only working with CS6. It's quite handy, but it's not a big problem. If you don't have CS6, you probably won't buy CS6 just for this feature. But it's quite useful. You change the color or brightness of the interface. As you can see, I'm always using this dark interface, but it's very fast to change it with Command, Function 1 or Function 2. You can change the interface colors. So with Command 1 and 2, Command F1, F2, you can easily change it, but you can customize it as well under the preferences and under interface. Here's the color theme which you can customize, but fastway is Command F1, F2. Okay, sometimes if I work on a very dark image, I prefer to change to bright interface and vice versa. So it's quite useful to know also this keyboard shortcut. Also, Tab gets rid of all the panels and you can concentrate on your image. Tab, again, gets them back. If you press Shift Tab, that just gets rid of the panels but keeps the toolbar on. Shift Tab. Okay, these are all useful to know. Okay, interface shortcuts. Then custom shortcuts. I usually get this from my delegates. They ask me, do I use custom shortcuts or I only use the default shortcuts? Of course I use custom shortcuts as well. Normally the function keys are not used by Photoshop. They are only used for panels, to show panels and hide panels. And what I do is with these function keys, so the keys on the top of your keyboard, I set them for the most commonly used features in Photoshop. For example, undo, redo, or the way they call it in Photoshop, step backward and step forward. If you know Photoshop, you probably know it's Command, Shift, Z, and Command, Alt, Z to go back and forth. Now, if you don't play the guitar or the piano, you will probably find it difficult to hold these down. What I do instead is using F1, F2. Now, that's what I'm doing. I'm using one finger going back, F2 to go forward. I don't even have to look. It has to be very easy to do this because you will do it a lot of time, especially in graphic design. I have my, let's say, the creative director standing behind me, and I have to show what I did in the last 10 steps. I have to be able to go really fast, go back and forth, because they will ask me, okay, what was the step before? Let me see how it looked before. So I have to go back and forth all the time, so it has to be really fast. And one of the reasons why they really like me working for them was that they told me, the creative director told me, she was really like, you had to be very fast, but even she told me that she can never tell what's happening on the computer because I press so many keys, and it's just happening, but she never could tell what am I doing. But she really liked it because she said that she doesn't have to wait around to see what's happening. As soon as she said something, I did it with a couple of keyboard shortcuts, and that's what she said. It's amazing to have that. So it's really worthwhile spending time to customize your shortcuts and to learn some default shortcuts, because it can make the difference in the field. Okay, so what was I saying? I was saying custom shortcuts. Yeah, function keys. F1 and F2 I use to undo, redo. If you don't know how to set them up, very easy. Under Edit menu, you go to Shortcuts, Keyboard Shortcuts. Okay, and there you can set up everything from panel menus, application menus, and the tools as well. So if I go to application menus and I go to the Edit, here you can see I have F1 and F2 set up for step backward and step forward. Then F3, what is F3 then? Just to show you, very useful feature. As you can see, I have two layers. Okay, to hide that layer which is selected at the moment, what would you do? You would probably click on the eye icon. Okay, most designers would do that. That's too much time wasted. I do this. Not bad. I do. It's not properly set up. It should be hiding that one. Let me go back. It's this feature. It's probably, I changed my workspace. Yeah, so it should be F3. It's just one keyboard shortcut to hide it and show it. You can't believe how useful this is again in when you're working for a tight deadline. Just to be able to hide and show the layer you are working can save you probably days if you work full-time design. Literally, per year, for example. It can save you days, just this feature. So the way you can set this up again, it's not a default shortcut. You have to use this feature called Layer Hide Layers, or if it's hidden, then it will be called Layer Show Layers. And again, the same way, you go to Edit Keyboard Shortcuts, and then you go to Application Menus, Layer, and it's all the way somewhere here at the bottom. Where we see F3, that's it, Show Layers. Okay, simple to set up. Believe me, one of the most useful keyboard shortcuts if you want to start using custom keyboard shortcuts. So I can always see what I've done there. For example, if I set this to multiply, or let's say screen, by the way, I'm doing all these keyboard shortcuts as well, I can show and hide again. If you never use blend modes, I just want to show you that the blend modes are very useful. This is when it's set to normal. If I, for example, set it to overlay, we'll blend the two together, and there's so many blend modes here, and it's quite difficult to remember all of them and to guess what will happen. Obviously, I know a couple of them for sure, or roughly what will happen, but some of them are so obscure I will never use them really. But there is a fast way to go through them. You can hold down Alt and Shift and then just start playing on the keyboard like a piano. You can go through all the blend modes by pressing just random keys, and then you can see which one is good. Obviously, this is like a pro tip. You can just simply go through it like that, instead of going there and choosing them. Okay, is it hard? Like, no, it's which one is the one that we need? You don't have time for that again. You can just very quickly go through them like this. And literally, Alt or Option Shift plus one of the characters on your keyboard will give you blend modes. And there's so many that the whole keyboard is covered with them. Okay, so for example, normal is Alt Shift N, multiply Alt Shift M, overlay Alt Shift O. So it makes sense, quite easy to remember the most important ones. But then the ones that you won't use, you can just simply play around on the keyboard with these keyboard shortcuts.
You can use the up and down arrows. Highlight.
You can do it on the PC, unfortunately not on the Mac. Yeah, or maybe there is a way. I know on the PC it works, but on the Mac it doesn't. Okay, let me show you another useful keyboard shortcut which is quite hidden, and no one really mentioned this. For example, if we have a design like this with lots of layers, but you decide to create a layer which combines all of your layers together. So here you can see I have the girl, I have the background, I have these names separately, everything is on a separate layer. What if I need all this kept non-destructive on separate layers, plus have a merged version of all of them? Very fast way with the keyboard shortcut, Control or Command Alt Shift E. It's a bit 4 keys together, Command Alt Shift E, and that creates a combined layer which will only so it will be everything here combined into one layer. It's quite useful as well. Also useful to know, Alt or Option click on a layer's eye icon will only show that selected layer. Turn off everything else. When you Alt click on the eye again, it will show again all the other layers. Okay, so that's quite useful as well to know. Okay, let's see the next one. Yeah, I already showed you how to move the selection while you are drawing, but there are a couple of useful zoom features in Photoshop. Have you heard about the bird's eye view zoom in Photoshop? Anyone? Bird's eye view? Okay, probably I can show you something new. Zooms in a good location of this image. So if I press H on the keyboard, okay, that will give me the hand tool. By the way, with every tool since CS4, we get this feature that if you hold down, not just press a key for a tool keyboard shortcut, if you hold it down and let go, it will switch back to the previously used tool. Very useful feature. For example, I'm using the clone stamp tool and the brush tool side by side. Okay, what I am going to do probably, let me just go on this layer on the top. What I am going to do probably is using the clone stamp tool and then sometimes switch back to the brush tool. So if I use the clone stamp tool and I start cloning something, let's say the hair, okay, and then I want to use the brush tool. If I select the brush tool, but let me just switch on the brush tool to a normal brush first, make it use just to be able to use this. I pick a color from here. Okay, so let's just go back to the clone stamp tool again. So I just show you this clone stamp, select, copy, and then instead of pressing B to switch to the brush tool, which is already good if you know that B is the brush tool, but if you not just press but hold down the B, that means you can draw with the brush tool, and when you let go, switches back to the clone stamp immediately, and you can continue using the clone stamp. So basically, by holding down a keyboard shortcut for a tool, you will have that tool until you let go the keyboard shortcut, and then it immediately switches back to the previously used tool. Okay, and usually in Photoshop, that's a typical scenario that you use two tools side by side. So instead of always pressing keyboard back and forth, you basically just use one keyboard, hold it down, let it go, and you use two different tools combined. It's also very useful. But we were talking about zooming in. So for zooming in, I use the keyboard shortcut Command 1, which will show the actual pixel size of the image. That's basically the 100% view. Command 0 will zoom out and fit the image to screen, or Control 0, Control 1. So these two are very useful, Command 0, Command 1. And once you zoomed into a specific area, by the way I zoom in is always, if I want to zoom into a specific area in the image, I just press and hold, as I said, the Z keyboard shortcut, zoom in by click and drag to the right, zoom out, click and drag to the left. So I zoom into a specific area. When I let go the Z, what will happen? We'll switch back to the previously used tool, which in this case was the clone stamp. Just like with the other tool I showed, not just press Z, press and hold, use, and then let go, and it will switch back to the previously used tool. So I am zoomed in close to this area of the image, and let's say I'm doing something very subtle, very close to the image, and I would like to do the same, but on a completely different part of the image. Now, instead of zooming out or skipping my zoom ratio and using the space to go around the image and try to find that area, I'm pressing and holding down H, click, and that gives me the bird's eye view. And then I can hold this, I don't even have to hold H from now on, just press the mouse and then go to another area, let go, and it zooms back to the previously used zoom ratio. Okay, H, click, relocate, and let go. Very fast way. It's almost like using the navigator panel, but you don't need the navigator panel because you are using your screen, your work area, as your navigator panel if you use this keyboard shortcut. Very useful, especially if you work on a massive canvas, a really big file. Then you have to, most of the time, work close, but you still have to travel on the image very fast. That's a very fast way to do that. Again, can save a lot of time if you use this feature. Okay, that's all about zooming in and out. Okay, about the thumbnails. Very useful thing also. I will open another image for this. Just go back. So let's just say we have lots of layers in our layers panel and we would like to see them properly. First of all, I would like to see all the contents of all my groups, my layer groups. If you hold down Command or Control while clicking on an arrow, it will open not just that group but also all the other groups. So you can see inside all of your groups what you have there. And the same applies to closing them. Holding down Command or Control on PC will close them all when you click on the arrows. So let's just say we have all these layers here, okay? And as you can see, the way I see the contents of these layers, actually it's not the best example. Let me find another one. Maybe this one will work better. Okay, again another one. Maybe this one. Yeah. So as you can see, for example, that cell phone there, in the thumbnail here, I can only see the cell phone and not the whole document. These options are very useful, and usually if I see someone with a setup like this, where the cell phone is visible, but it shows that the cell phone is in this part of the image, and the shadow on the top as well is in that part of the image, so you can tell that the shortcuts, the thumbnails, are representing the whole canvas, and they will show that the actual object on that layer is where in the canvas. So this is one way to use the thumbnails, or the other one is to clip thumbnails to layer bounds. By the way, I just right click on the thumbnail to change this feature. In this case, I will have a much better view of the object itself, and I don't necessarily need to see it, where is it on the layer, I mean in the canvas, but I will be able to tell what is on that layer. Even that little shadow is now visible that it's a shadow, so I don't need to turn it on and off to be able to tell it, while in the other option it was very hard to see what's that little like dust there on that layer. Okay, so it's usually something which really, whenever I see someone who's in, let's say, web design, where in web design you have hundreds of layers, and probably on those layers you will have little 1 pixel size things, and if you use this feature, you will actually be able to tell, even if it's a very small part of the whole design, what's on the actual layer. So I always tell web designers and even user interface designers to always switch to this feature, and most of the times better to use small thumbnails to be able to see as much as possible on your layers panel. And never have like a small layers panel as one thing which would really annoy a creative director if you work in a company. If you have something, a setup like this, where you have, let's say, your swatches, and there's a huge area which you don't use at all, and then you scroll up and down here in your layers panel. They will fire you in like 2 seconds if you start doing this. Honestly, this is very important to have as much as possible for the layers panel. Sometimes I've seen even a setup where they had a screen, a secondary screen set to like vertical way, and just for the layers panel. So, and layers and maybe history or something like that, because it's so important to see your layers. Even though I use keyboard shortcuts to turn them on and off, I still have to see it because that's my structure. That's like everything what I do in a document. So it's very important. Always have it big as much as possible for the layers panel. Okay. Yep. Then so these are the thumbnail options. Then obviously smart objects is something that you definitely need to use. Smart objects can save you a lot of your work. So for example, let me just show you a very simple example of smart objects. If I just turn off all the other layers, that's my original design, and I decide to resize this. If I turn it into a smart object, it will work well and I won't lose quality. If there is a version which is not using smart object, then I will lose quality. So I made a quick duplicate, Command J, by the way, duplicate, right click, convert to smart object, fast way, but I also have a function key for this. F6 for me is this convert layer to smart object. Again, one of the most used functions for me. And then I select these two, okay, and I resize them. So let me just resize them, okay. Let's say the creative director decided to only use a small version of this image. Let's be in a thumbnail size like this, okay. And while I'm doing that, let me just zoom closer to it so you can see. It's not important for now. I just press enter, okay. So okay, we resize both of them. There's two of these on top of each other, and I am going to now resize them again to its full version, because in the meantime the creative director again changed his mind and asked me to again resize the whole image. Now if I zoom closer, let me just press enter first, and if I zoom closer here on a detail of the image, it looks perfect because the smart object is on top. But if I turn that off, and let's just say we haven't used the smart object in the first place, this is what we get. So resizing is very destructive in Photoshop, and with smart objects you can completely defend yourself. So you will never lose quality with resizing. And that is just one of many features with smart objects that will help you to save time and to be flexible. Okay, I don't have time to cover everything about smart objects, but there's so many features for them, smart filters and so on and so forth. So okay, smart objects. Then masking is obviously something that can also save you a lot of time. Just this simple example that I have here, let's just see how I used masking in this case. Okay, so if I have this design, I have this cell phone and I have that image together. How can I make it look like the way you've seen it, that the guy's foot is coming through the phone, and also a black and white background is visible, and only inside the phone we will see colors. So let's say this is the task. How can we do this? It's very simple, but only if you use masking. So the only thing I have is the image, and I have the phone. These two separately, okay? And let's just say we were provided with a PNG of the phone, so it doesn't have anything around it. It has transparent background. And then the image is a photo. So how can I combine the two together? So it is very simple. All I need to do is add, first of all, a black and white adjustment layer. So I just go to the adjustments and choose black and white. Okay, that's it. And I just hide this. So there's my black and white adjustment layer. First of all, I can put this a little bit lower. And then what I would like to do is to see through the phone. So I make a selection, I use the rectangular marquee tool, and I make a selection. See how useful it is to have that space, moving the selection around. And even if it's not perfect, you have another feature which is called transform selection. Even after you let it go, you can still change your selection. Just go to select, transform selection, and then it works like a free transform, but without changing the image itself. You just transform the selection. Once you have that, you can click on the mask option, or if you like saving your main functions, I have this on F7. F7 is for me the mask. Just let me show you. It's under layer mask, reveal selection. Reveal selection means the same as clicking on the mask option here at the bottom, which means it will show the selected area and hide everything else around the selection. But now, if I press Command I, that's inverting the selection. So it's completely non-destructively, that little black and white thumbnail there can decide what to show and what to hide. White shows, black hides. So if I press Command I, that inverts the colors, and now white shows this part and hides the frame. If I press Command I, black hides the inside part and shows with white the frame around it. So now I can see through the phone with a mask, very fast and easy to do. And then what I can do is use the same mask for the black and white adjustment, because remember what I would like to do, let's say this is an advert, and the advert is about, with this phone you will see everything in colors, I don't know, something like that, something stupid marketing bullshit. I select this, I select the mask itself, and I can inverse the selection as well. So I just command clicked on the mask, command click, then I go to select and I choose inverse. Okay, then I go to my black and white adjustment layer and I press, what do I press to fill that in with black? I want to fill that selection with black. Command backspace, are you sure? Old backspace. Command backspace would fill with white because that's the background color. Old backspace will fill with black. And voila, we have it filled already with colors because I've hidden the black and white adjustment on that selected part. So I masked out the black and white adjustment, which means I see through and see the original color on that area. And what I can do is also make it look like his foot is actually coming through the phone, so I can get rid of that little frame there. I can just simply zoom closer to it, okay? And which mask do I need to select? The black and white adjustment mask or the phone mask to hide the frame? The phone masks, excellent. So I select that using the brush tool and just simply draw over it. By the way, using a tablet is so much easier to do things like this than with a mouse. If I go over it, let's say too much, I just press X to switch between my two colors. Okay, press X, and then I just draw over it here again. I don't want to go over the screen, so I just be a bit careful now, like that. It's fine. So the foot is already coming through the phone. What I need to do is to fill that also in with the colors. The same thing again, if I want to copy this mask, instead now of command clicking and then go on the other one, inversing the selection and pasting it in, I will just simply copy and paste a mask by alt clicking and dragging this mask onto that. So alt click and drag paste, replace mask, yes. And now it will be filled with the color. I think I didn't use the full opacity, but it's fine. What you can also do, let me just check that mask. It should be bright. It doesn't matter. You can see that you can copy mask, or what you can also do is put things together in a group. I can put these two together in a group, press Command G to make it a group, and then drag one of the masks on the group itself and delete the other one from the layer. And then whatever you do on this group, let me just draw over it with white, will affect both the black and white adjustment and the phone as well. Okay, so I'm accessing both of them from the same mask. I completely ruined the image at the same time, but it also can save you a lot of time if you use masking on groups. And by the way, how can you do, how many of you use masking on a daily basis? Okay, that's good. How many, there's a tricky question. How can you do, or how can you apply more than one layer mask onto the same layer? Because obviously there's a layer mask. If I click on the mask again here, it will add another mask, but there is a vector mask. And if I want to click more, it will stop. There's no more options. So I only have a pixel mask and a vector mask for one layer. How can I apply more? And if I can, what's the maximum number of layer masks you can apply for a layer? No one? You like to know how and how much? The way you do it, very simple. I actually showed you how to do it. You make a group, Command G, put the mask on the group. You can keep also another mask on the layer itself, and then you press Command G again. and then you can put another mask there, and then you press the Command G again and then put it there. The maximum limit is 10, so you can have 10 groups, so it's subgroups, group inside group, 10 groups plus the layers mask, so 11 layer masks affecting the same layer. Believe me, again, a huge time saver if you do this, because sometimes you have a mask, but you want to, let's say, in this case, obviously this is too much, it will be a bit too complicated to understand, but if I have a mask like this, okay, and I want to control a separate part separately, I can, let's say, just hide this part on this mask, but if I want to see without that adjustment, I can just shift click on this mask and see the previous mask. Okay, so you can have different versions of masking on the same layer by just using groups. Okay, it's a bit techy, but very useful feature. And believe me, it can save a lot of time in design. Okay, next one is when you have multiple documents. So about masking, by the way, about masking, another useful keyboard shortcut is Alt-click on a layer mask will show you the mask itself. If you want to see the mask itself, just Alt-click on the mask and it will show it like this. Alt-click again and then you switch back to normal view. When it's very useful. For example, let me just show you a very fast example on the same image here. If I want to make a selection of this girl, okay, let me just go to the original image. Let's just say I want to make a selection and get rid of the background. The way I would do it, I would go to Select and choose Color Range. I just need this layer to select. Select Color Range, click on the background, okay, and we can change the selection preview. Actually, here in the selection preview, we can choose grayscale. What I need is to be able to select the background. I'm going to set the fuzziness, which is basically the tolerance, to something around 40. Whatever we see here in white will be selected. Whatever we see in black won't be selected. So if I click on the girl's skin, you can see it tries to select the skin colors from the image. And if I press Shift and click with Shift, I can add to the selected colors very quickly and easily, and at the same time see or preview the changes. Now what I would like to do is to select the background, so I click on the background and then shift click on these areas and very quickly and easily select everything which I need to include in my selection, maybe that as well. Maybe reduce the fuzziness a bit, around 30. But the problem is there were a couple of areas where probably the surrounding reflected colors on her, probably that these are the nails which has reflection on them, and the glasses. So those I don't want to include in the selection, because basically if I mask this background out, that means I will see through her nails as well and see the whatever I put in the background and the glasses as well. So after I click OK, I save this as a mask. I pressed F7, which is my custom keyboard shortcut. Press Command I to invert the selection, and then I Alt click on the mask to be able to get rid of these problems. So using the brush tool, press X to switch to white, and then I just simply draw over these parts, very fast and easy way. Because I don't need to see the image, I can easily tell what are the edges and what are the parts which will be her and not the background. Okay, so very quickly and easily I go through it, like that. Done. Alt click and I'm back to the view. By the way, another useful feature, command clicking on a layer, on the layer icon, will create a new layer, not on top of the layer that you are working on, but below. So if I click on that icon, it will create a layer on top. That's the default way Photoshop creates a layer. If you command click on this icon, it will automatically create it below. I will fill this with a color, let's say my foreground color. So let's fill it with the background color just to make it more stand out. And let's zoom closer to the hair. Color range did quite a good job even on the hair, even though the background wasn't just simply like one color, it had different reflections on it. It still did quite a good job, but you won't be able to send this to a magazine. They will reject it immediately, because this is very pixelated, the hair here. It's quite good selection, not bad, but in professional work, they won't accept anything like this. If we alt-click on the mask, you can see it looks quite nice. There's lots of little subtle details, but it still, as I said, won't be enough. You would probably, or they would probably tell you that you will have to do this manually and just refine the selection or the mask until it gets more realistic. You won't have to be afraid. There is a feature for this in Photoshop. Very simple. All you need to do is go to the masks panel. So window, masks, where is it? In this case, probably properties in CS6, yeah. They always keep renaming these panels. So which used to be masks, now it's called properties. Let me select it again. Properties, and why is it so big? Okay, so properties, and in the properties we have an option called mask edge. So another very useful way to use the mask or make the most of a mask, just simply select mask edge in the properties panel or masks panel in previous versions, and here we can add the edge detection called smart radius and increase the radius, and immediately just look at the details. Immediately, even after adding a bit of the radius, if I press P, we can see before and after. It gets better, but if I increase the radius even more, look at the detail level there and the softness of the hair, which was lacking before. So now if I go back and forth, you can see it was very harsh, and now it looks much better. If I want to see this on white background, I can. Let me just switch, or we can even see the mask here. So I just change the view and look at that detail level. Automatically from this crap, we could create this. Okay, that's a big difference. So that's a really cool feature, and I highly recommend to use it. And this will be something that definitely they will accept as a selection. Okay, so just again from the distance before and after, here you can't really see much difference, but it's definitely better than before. Okay, that was about selections as well, some useful things. Let's see the next one, multiple documents. Let's just say we have multiple documents. I have these two images, and I need to switch between them all the time. What are the ways to do this? Once again, I think I personally know this because I worked together with a guy who was always opening up every document. Let me just show you. It's worth remembering this. There is an option in the preferences to, whenever you open up an image, it will open it up in a tab mode. It's in CS4, this is how it works. Under interface, you have these open documents as tabs. Now if I turn that off, and some people use it like this still, and I open 3 images, this is what Photoshop will do. And I'm sure you remember this because before CS4, I think, maybe CS3 already had the tabs. I think it was in CS4. This is how it used to work. We always had these little windows, and then we had to browse through and move them all around to be able to find what we are looking for. Now this is definitely not the way you should work in CS4 or later. What you should do is have that preference called under interface called open documents as tabs, and then when you open more images, more documents, it will nicely consolidate all them into tabs on the top, just like a browser, internet browser would do. The way you switch between them is Control Tab, on Mac as well, not Command Tab, Control Tab. You can switch and go around like a carousel. It goes from left to right and then jumps back to the left. What if I'm there and I want to go to the second one? Honestly, I'm not crazy. This is again something I would do. I would press Control Shift Tab. Instead of going round, I will just go back. Okay, so Control Tab to go forward, Control Shift Tab to go back. Okay, it might seem very small difference, but when you want to show your creative director or someone, your lead designer, the difference between 2 documents, you can just use this keyboard shortcut. It saves a lot of time as well. But that's not all. What if you want to see all the open documents, and in this case, let me just close this one, and I have these 2 documents. What if I want to see them side by side, but switch to viewing one of them and do this very often? Quickly switch between, see them in a grid, see just one, work. See them in a grid, see again one and work. That's again very often that you have to do this in graphic design. in this case, usually when you have like a reference that you have to make something similar to, then you have to do this. The way I do this is again custom keyboard shortcuts, Command Shift F and Command Alt Shift F. Don't have to write it down. This is just what I set up as a custom keyboard shortcut. But the option is here in Window, Arrange, and Consolidate all to tabs and Tile. Tile is when you see them side by side. Consolidate all to tabs when you see only the selected one fit to screen. Okay, and these are the two keyboard shortcuts I use. So once again, let me just hide my panels, and I show you. So Command Shift F for me will consolidate into tabs. Oh, sorry, see tiled the images, and then Command Alt Shift F will just concentrate on the selected image. So very fast way to switch between the two modes. See the reference on the right, switch back to work on this image. Again, see the reference on the right, switch back. But what if I want to, let's just say, I want to move in the two images at the same time. Again, something which you might need to do. Let's say this is before and that is after. Just imagine this is before and after. And my creative director wants me to see the whole of both of them, but like traveling through them at the same time. Of course, you can press space and move around here, then click there and move around there as well with space. But what you can also do is press Shift Space, and then you will be able to move in two documents at the same time. Again, quite cool. And even cooler, if you press Command, it's a bit difficult to hold down. Command Alt, I think it's just Command. It will switch between the languages now. Maybe it works with Z as well. No, it doesn't work. What you can do is, if you have an English keyboard, you can use space, Z and Shift together. No, actually, it works here as well. Yeah, Z and Shift together to zoom in to a specific area, and it zooms on the other one as well. If I zoom out, that will zoom out as well. So Shift Z to click and drag to zoom in and then zoom out. Okay, which ones are the ones I haven't talked about? A fast way to load more images into, we have only 3 left. So let me just show you. If you have several images that you want to load into, let's say these 4 images, you want to load into a Photoshop document, the fastest way to do is from Bridge, which comes free with Photoshop, by the way, this application. You go to Tools, Photoshop, Load Files into Photoshop Layers. So I selected those 4 images, choose this option, and then it will load it automatically into layers into Photoshop. And it will even go and rename all the layers. I mean, use the file names for the layer names. So basically now I have all these images in one Photoshop document. Okay, so that's a quite useful time saver as well, if you need to combine images together in one Photoshop document. And last but not least, I would like to show you a couple of useful keyboard shortcuts for typography, because again, something that you might need to use a lot. If you use typography a lot, then let me just show you this. I just created a text frame, and if you didn't know that they introduced this new feature in CS6, the lorem ipsum, I can paste lorem ipsum into a selected text. And let me just change the font color. Okay, so lorem ipsum is, it even says this is Photoshop's version of lorem ipsum, basically a dummy text. If you want to just show like a design, once you get the editorial text, this is how it will look like. But before you get that, you can just simulate text with lorem ipsum. But what I wanted to show is how to use a couple of keyboard shortcuts for the text. So for example, if I want to increase, first of all, how to select text. Again, something which I can tell lots of designers, they don't know about this. If you want to, let's say you want to just select a character or select by character, you can hold Shift and left and right arrow to select by character. It's quite useful to know. You can also use Command Shift to select by word and arrows. So Command Shift arrows to select. If you use Command Shift down and up, it will select by paragraph. It's also quite fast way to select. But you can also use your mouse. If you double click on a word, that will select the word. If you triple click, it will select the line. If you 4 times click, it will select the paragraph. How do you say that? Triple, and what's the 4? Quadruple. Quadruple click will select the paragraph. Okay, so these are quite useful to know, but what I really like in Photoshop, there are a couple of other very useful keyboard shortcuts. For example, set a word into all caps, Command-Shift-K, and it switches back as well. So Command-Shift-K, all caps, switch back to normal one, Command-Shift-K. Another one, Command-Shift. By the way, Command-Shift is most type keyboard shortcuts start with Command-Shift. So once you have your fingers on it, you can do a lot of things with the same combination. Command-Shift, full stop, increases the size, while comma will make it smaller. Again, quite useful. You can use the leading, which can be again useful if I want to change the leading, which is basically the distance between lines. I can use Alt or Option, up and down arrows on the keyboard, so you can see I can change the leading between them. The same, holding down Alt, right and left, will change the tracking, which is the distance between the characters, so that's like horizontal difference, while the other one was vertical difference. That's why it's up and down and right and left. And by the way, do you know how it's called if you just do this tracking between characters, like each character like this? That's the kerning, that's it. It's basically the same keyboard shortcut, but now I would call this kerning, while when it's a whole paragraph or lines, then it's called tracking. And there's one more thing which I use with keyboard shortcuts, baseline shift, which is Alt Shift up and down to move a selected word from its baseline. So that's the baseline always, and if you want to shift the baseline, you can simply lift up or move down a selected part of the text from the baseline, the default baseline. How do you accept typing? What do you do if you want to accept this typing? Command return, yes, command return, or you can click on that little thing or click anywhere else. If you press escape, it works in InDesign, it doesn't work in Photoshop, it will cancel the changes. Command return is my favorite. Just simply press command return and it accepts the typing. Also, if you select, if you have a text selected like this, let me just change quickly my color. I just select the red color for my background color. The command backspace also works for text. So I just have the selection, the very first technique that I showed you. Command backspace, Alt backspace for the 2 colors works for text. If you don't have anything selected from the text, just the layer, then it works on the whole layer together. If you have a selected word like this, I press Command backspace, that will fill only that word with the selected color, in this case red. And that's all. And I think I could cover it in time. Thanks a lot for your attention. I hope you enjoyed it.
Very much.